Hey, welcome back, animal lovers, to Awakening with Your Animal Family. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Schoen, and I'm really excited today to introduce you to a dear friend and colleague that we've known each other ever since she finished vet school, and she was reminding me before vet school, or during vet school. So this is Dr. Karen Becker, and Dr. Becker graduated from Iowa State College of Veterinary Medicine and then just took off into this beautiful blossoming career where she was able to really follow all her passions. She is someone who's living her passion. And with the challenges of that she and I chuckle about, we all know that and stuff. So after graduating from Iowa State Veterinary School, Dr. Becker completed an exotic animal internship in California and at the Berlin Zoo in Germany. She's also certified in acupuncture, homeopathy, and rehabilitation. And in 1999, Dr. Becker founded the first proactive animal hospital in the Midwest, opened a functional medicine exotic animal clinic in 2002, and a rehabilitation and pain management clinic in 2010. Now, her other real passion is also wildlife. And so she's also licensed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to rehabilitate injured, orphaned, and endangered species. And with that, set up her own nonprofit called Covenant Wildlife, where she does the rehab. Dr. Becker lectures throughout the world and writes about species-appropriate nutrition. She co-authored the Whole Dog Journal's Best Homemade Diet Book of All Time award called Real Food for Healthy Pets, which I was always recommending to my clients. I said, this is the first book that really says it all so well. And, you know, Karen and I have been friends way before that. She was also honored to be named one of Chicago's top 10 veterinarians in Chicago Magazine and was the most followed veterinarian in the world, according to Facebook. She was filling me in. She has over 2.4 million followers. So boy, that keeps her busy. Dr. Becker is also the veterinary consultant for Dr. Mercola Healthy Pets, and which is the largest pet wellness website. And she consults now for a variety of pet wellness and pet food companies, designing diets and pet health products all over the world. And the reason I'm so grateful and happy to have Dr. Becker on in the midst of her busy schedule is there isn't a product that I've seen of hers that I'm not in alignment with. When I first got started, my journey was just pioneering all of this and getting it accepted. Dr. Becker has taken it a whole next step forward and bringing on really good products, really good foods, and taking it to, again, to a whole other level. So with that, it's an absolute joy to introduce you to Dr. Karen Becker, our guest for today. Welcome,
Aw,
Karen.
thank you, Alan. What a pleasure and a joy it is to spend this next hour with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's such a joy, and it's so nice to catch up. We catch up every few years between our busy schedules, and I call it the cosmic chuckle. We just kind of laugh how our lives parallel, and we can connect on the deeper levels of being pioneers in this holistic integrative movement.
Well, I tell you, you pioneered long before me. It was your vast writing, whether it's books, resources, articles. When I was going through veterinary school, I was one of the rare veterinarians that knew I would graduate practicing proactive functional medicine, what used to be called alternative medicine. I knew that I would be that practitioner. And so there are very few mentors out there in the mid 80s, early 90s to provide resources. And you were not just an inspiration to me, Dr. Schoen, but thousands of young veterinarians that were looking for what I call common sense, natural, at least start with the least toxic options. You were one of those practitioners that said, listen, you're going to learn this amazing system of medicine in veterinary school that we need. If you have patients hit by car or acute trauma or infectious diseases, you're going to get unbelievable training there. But you are not going to graduate with a tool belt helping clients understand how to prevent chronic disease and how to unlock a healing potential and how to make sure that the animals are not emotionally or psychologically stressed. I didn't get any of that in veterinary school. And as a person that believes in holism, which is, of course, I want to treat the dog or cat, but you're also then, because the dog or cat is a product of his or her environment, you end up by default evaluating the environment and helping to make the healthiest environment possible. And it was you that, as one of the very first mentors I had, that said, you need to be looking at a much bigger picture than just the 4 years you got in vet school. So I am forever thankful that you paved the way for me and thousands of other integrative veterinarians. So thank you.
Thank you. It brings me such joy hearing that, because I get all these flashbacks of all the challenges that we faced when, just as you said it, to me, it was just common sense.
Yeah.
It's just common sense. And that's what keeps us all connected. Is this isn't saying throw out the baby with the bathwater, Western medicine is bad. It's great.
Oh my gosh, I'm so thankful for that training. So thankful.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's so much more. There's
yeah.
so much more. And that's the beauty and the excitement that keeps us alive and loving to still help in the different ways that we do now.
Yes,
So
exactly.
with that, today, I'm just so grateful to have you on to share about what you feel right now are the healthiest pet foods that are out there. Because during my time, I said, oh, I put pet foods on a scale of 1 to 10. And I talked about this one of my earlier shows. The best is homemade, organic, balanced, and everything. The worst is your generic kibble, the cheapest one that's out there. Excuse me. And so the question now is, what I've noticed is, in the last few years, there's just been a overflowing of all these new different types of holistic, natural, organic, freeze-dried, raw, all these different types of pet foods that, honestly, I was getting a little overwhelmed. Not just my clients. I go, wow, is this one better than this one and this? And I was doing my best and still continue to do my best. We interviewed Raised Right Pet Food
Oh,
in an earlier show, which you were you're the formulator for that. And I'm trying to decide, okay, obviously there isn't one food that works for all animals.
no.
And it's finding which one is the right one for you, your animal family, and it may be different ones for different ones in your animal family,
Yep.
but works for your lifestyle to be the healthiest, happiest for everyone. And so I couldn't think of anyone more qualified now than you, where you're the formulator of a lot of these foods. And we have the exact same philosophy and the exact same joie de la vie of sharing our lives with all of our animal friends.
Yeah.
I don't have a cat right now or dog, which I'll get one but right now it's my family of deer and peacocks and the eagles and the wildlife all around me that I surround myself with.
Yeah.
But so if we can get started, okay, there's raw, there's organic, there's natural, there's human grade, there's all these terms. Can you elaborate on them? Because I know I've talked to them about organic isn't even organic these days
Right.
because of some changes in laws.
Yeah.
So if you can just start sharing which ones you feel are the best and how someone, an educated animal lover, which is what I'm blessed with this audience, how to have them navigate through all these different choices.
Of course. And it is totally overwhelming. Even I myself, well, let me back up and tell you how this category opened up. So when you graduated from veterinary school, there were only ultra processed diets available. Ultra processed diets are all in one. That also goes for factory farmed animals. We put all their rations, all their vitamins, all their minerals, all their fat, fiber, protein, all in one, and we feed it to them. They get no choice. They get no diversity. They get no variability. This is what you're going to eat. And it's been scientifically formulated, and this is what you need to eat. And we took that from livestock raising and we transposed that down to dogs and cats. In fact, this beautiful man, Mark Morris, a very kind, insightful, forward-thinking veterinarian, This man actually created the very first can of Science Diet KD. He made the first prescription diets. And he did this because he had a dog that was dying of kidney failure and he wanted to offer an alternative. And this is his autobiography. I'm just going to read a chapter. What he said is for people having difficulty getting dogs to eat when they're in kidney failure, to eat dehydrated foods. And when he wrote this book, I want to say it's 1936. I don't, maybe 40s. Yeah, 54 original. The only thing available back when Mark Morris was a veterinarian was dehydrated foods. And what he said was, Dr. Morris advised the owner to make a thick broth of chicken feet, fish heads, butcher scraps, pour it over the dry rations because pets don't need fresh meat, he says. They can get their protein from rejected eggs, unsaleable fish, soybeans, and sour milk. And so his thought was this: you could combine basically the leftover ingredients come from the human food industry that either are going to be discarded, go to a landfill, or not used, and we can recycle them and turn them into pet food. So Mark Morris, this beautiful veterinarian, partnered with Mr. Hill, who owned a slaughterhouse and rendering plant in Kansas, and he started Hill's Science Diet. And by doing that, he came out with the very first commercially available prescription diets. And at that point, there was no research behind these diets. They were brand new diets out of his passion. He's like, I want to save my dog dying of kidney failure. I'm going to try this. And he was able to extend some life by him making his own food for his dog. And then he took it to a commercial level. When you graduated from vet school, Alan, all that was available to you was ultra processed diets, which means shelf stable, everything in one, vitamins and minerals added to leftover, whatever the human industry, let me back up and say this. When meat is inspected, a USDA meat inspector either marks it as USDA inspected or USDA failed. And so everything that is inspected in a slaughterhouse that is approved goes into the human food supply. And everything that is rejected, so abscesses, tumors, diseased animals, there's a whole list of things that humans, thankfully, our food system says will not get into our food supply. That goes into pet food. So Dr. Morris took these leftover scraps and made good use of them. And out of that came a whole new sector of not just dehydrated ultra processed foods, but now prescription diets. And so it still falls under ultra processed, but when you graduated from veterinary school, Alan, that's all you had available were canned foods and dry foods. That's it. When I graduated from vet school, all we had was the same highly processed, rendered, not approved for human consumption, pet foods, dry food and canned food and prescription food. So I graduated veterinary school, thankfully understanding the power of food and real food, not just empty carbohydrates that fill up you or your animals or your kids, not dollar menu nutrition, and not shelf stable, ultra processed junk food nutrition. I grew up in a family that really understood healthy, good food and the power of diversity, organic eating, and seasonal eating. So my thought was, I'm going to feed my animals this way, but I couldn't find a pet food that fit that bill. But then thankfully, the universe blessed me with Steve Brown. Steve Brown was the man that invented the first of it commercially available raw food diet. And he was just like Mark Morris. He's not an entrepreneur. He didn't set out saying, I'm going to create a brand new niche in the pet food industry. He didn't set out doing that. He had dogs that were dying younger of chronic diseases, and he was already formulating. Steve Brown has been in almost all of the major dry manufacturing plants in the US. He has assisted in formulation for the top dry foods on the market. And he saw what went into them. And his statement as a dog breeder was, now that I know the backside, now that I've seen it, I can't feed it. So he started first with homemade diet and then moved on to raw diet, and then saw this profound change in his breeding dogs, and litter size triples and lifespans doubled. And he was like, oh my gosh, it was like a living Pottinger's cat study all over. He said, oh my gosh. So he turned to his partner and said, this changed our lives. Our dogs are living longer, more vibrant lives with less disease and no health issues. We have to take this to market. And his partner said, if you do this, Steve, this is the end of your career. You will be blackballed. And Steve said, I don't care. Like this people have to know about this. So Steve put everything on the line and created the first commercially available raw food diet. Now he turned around a year later and sold that brand. So he's not affiliated with Steve's Real Food whatsoever. But the premise is he took this concept to market. And at that time, everyone in 1999, everyone, Mars, Science Diet, Eukanuba, period. Everyone laughed at him and said, it's so funny. And, his first year out, he had 12 stores pick up his brand, and he had one veterinarian put a freezer in their waiting room. That was me. And he came from Oregon to Chicago and said, listen, I want to do a little educational seminar so we can talk about why you're the only veterinarian in the country that wants to sell fresh, whole living food. So we did that. And we've been best friends ever since. But out of Steve Brown's desire to create fresh, whole living foods that it's all the math is done for you. You just open it out of your freezer and put it in the bowl. He had this vision. And all of the big players said, it's never going to impact the industry. He's crazy. There's no research behind it. Just as Mark Morris had no research behind his prescription foods. And yet it started catching on. And from 1999 to 2003, I had to put in 3 freezers, and 6 pet food stores around me started putting in freezers. And then by 2006, pet food stores were donating a lot of their shelf stable space for more freezers. And do you know that the fresh food category, Alan, has become the fastest growing segment of the pet food industry? And let me tell you, all of the big players in the last 10 years are not just now getting a little nervous. They're starting to recognize this micro niche, this tiny 4% of the pet loving population around the world is actually starting to impact our sales and our bottom line. And in the last 10 years, this micro niche segment of the pet food industry that started with commercially available raw food, which for many people is too expensive, not convenient. They don't have freezers. It's too far of a jump. Their veterinarians know nothing about it. It's totally confusing and it just seems too weird. The industry has filled in. So now we have ultra processed foods, which have been there since, Purina started in 1951 or whatever, canned and dry food. But then on this side, we have frozen raw food. And then out of that came gently cooked food, because people are like, you know what, I'm not doing raw food. It's gross and weird. So then the gently cooked category came about, which is a beautiful gift to people that aren't ready for raw. Then people are like, listen, I like raw, but it kind of freaks me out a little. Let's dehydrate it and freeze dry it. And so then that category hit the market. And slowly but surely, in the last about 20 years, we have added more SKUs, more products, more brands, to the point, Ellen, that I can't even keep up. I kept up with all of the fresher foods, or what we call it. I kept up with that entire category of all of the new brands hitting the market up until last year. And now there's about 12 to 15 brands hitting the market every month. And even I can't keep up. So don't beat yourself up about not being able to keep up. But you bring up the best point, the confusion. And sadly, I have to say, the same marketing shiftiness has entered into the fresher category of pet food, just as it's been present in the ultra processed category of pet food all along. So is it a tremendous amount for pet owners to navigate? Yes. And what it means, Alan, is that it is our job to help our blessed clients become so empowered and so knowledgeable that the day of blindly trusting any doctor, and this is hard for me to say, but whether it's your human medical doctor or your podiatrist or your veterinarian, yes, partner with them. Yes, take their advice. Yes, above all, line up ethically and morally with the type of medicine they practice. So, you resonate with what they have in the pharmacy, generally speaking, and you're good with that. So partner with people that you love and trust. Awesome. But the day of blindly taking recommendations without doing your own homework for anything, especially if we're guardians of other creatures, it's our job, Alan, to help, including ourselves as consumers. We have to become knowledgeable enough advocates that we know what we're feeding and why we're feeding it. And we feel comfortable with the companies we're partnering with. So what this comes down to is educating our clients and educating ourselves enough to know this isn't about a brand. Just as you don't go into your local grocery store and say, you know what, I'm just going to buy Procter & Gamble. You don't do that. You put in your cart nourishing foods from brands that you hopefully trust. When it comes to discerning the GMO issue and the glyphosate issue and the contaminant issue and the organic and the natural, all of those claims, really what this comes down to is either visiting the company website and getting a really thorough understanding of transparency. And that really is the most important thing that I do now, is help people understand the right questions to ask when they either go to their website, and if they're not getting it there, call the company. Transparent, ethical, forward thinking, grounded out companies have customer service that is so fired up to answer questions that if you can't find it on the website, the 3 questions we have to empower everyone to find out is, number 1, what's the quality of the materials going into your pet food? So there's 2 categories of food. There's food, which is approved for human consumption, and then there's pet feed. Feed is not approved for human consumption. So believe it or not, 99% of pet foods on the market should be called pet feed because they're not human grade. It's made from rejected, rendered leftovers. And that's cool as long as, in my opinion, you know you're feeding recycled, rejected leftovers. And that's, I think, partly why I've become kind of a controversial veterinarian, is I'm certainly not trying to stir the pot. But I wholeheartedly believe that if pet owners knew the quality of the raw materials in their pet foods, they would never feed them. They've trusted the brand because their great grandpa said to feed it, or they're busy, or it's the most expensive food in the store, but they're not really diving in to find out exactly what's in their food. So transparent companies will happily tell you, this is feed grade vitamins and minerals, this is feed grade carrots, and this is feed grade chicken meal. Good. If you know, it's your job to know what that means. But if you're looking for food grade or human grade, when you call the company, they will say, hey, we use all USDA inspected and approved meats. We do use trim. Trim means it's from inspected healthy animals that died by slaughter. I don't know how much you know about FDA, but FDA actually has what's called a compliance policy that allows pet food manufacturers, even though it's against FDA law, to use animals that have died other than slaughter in pet food. There's what's called a compliance policy that allows pet food manufacturers to use dead, dying, diseased animals, which means there's a workaround that pet food companies can put diseased animals that have been in a field for 6 days, and then the rendering truck comes, that goes into pet food from a workaround called a compliance policy. And people don't know that. I'm fine with all that stuff going into pet food as long as it's appropriately labeled, but it's not. And that's where the frustration comes in. You really can't glean the quality of pet food off a label because AFCO has such stringent labeling policies that you're not going to get the information you really want or need. So the website and phone call. So the first question is, are you feed or food? And it's not that all feed grade, not approved for human consumption foods are bad. There's a ton of feed grade foods that I love, support, feed, no problem, because I've asked the right questions. And I know that, let's say, spleen is a rendered product, but spleen is fine to feed to pets, but the companies will gladly tell you that on the phone. Second question you're going to ask is processing, which this is on the scale of highly processed, ultra processed, all the way down to raw. So then as a pet parent, you have to figure out, okay, here's where my comfort lies. I'm cool with all raw. I would like a gently cooked product. I would like a freeze-dried product or a dehydrated product. You need to decide lifestyle, pocketbook, how much freezer space you have. All those things are individual choices based on time, money, resources, and then of course your pet. But then the third question you have to ask yourself about the food that you're feeding or the food that you might be interested in feeding to your pet is species appropriateness, which means species appropriateness is how close is the food that I'm looking at in terms of macronutrients to what this animal would be getting in the wild. So for instance, hummingbirds eat nectar. That's their God-given ancestral natural diet. We can buy hummingbird nectar in powdered form, and they range from toxic with food dyes down to all natural organic cane sugar. But we can emulate a hummingbird's food and make it a species appropriate diet that we can put a feeder out and feed hummingbirds. Species appropriate diet for earthworms is dirt and soil. That's what they were meant to eat. A species appropriate diet for dogs and cats is high moisture. So whether it's a cat hunting moles, voles, mice, or songbirds, about 70% water in all those, 70, 80% water in all those prey species. wild dogs, dingoes, jackals, wolves, coyotes, all of the canids, all of the wild dog species eat a high protein, and kitties too, high protein, moderate fat, low carbohydrate. So when we think about species appropriateness, we have to think about, okay, how many carbs are in this bag of food and how much fat? And is it good fat? Is it healthy fat? Or is it rendered rancid fat or like used restaurant grease, which is actually used a lot in pet food as a palatant? So old restaurant grease is, animals really like to eat that. And it's not on the label, you know? So you have to ask those questions. So when it comes to species appropriateness, what I tell all of my clients is flip over that bag of food, add up the fat, fiber, moisture, the ash. If you don't see ash, you can estimate 6% in protein and subtract it from 100. And the remaining amount of what's on the side of your dog food is starch or carbohydrate. And dogs and cats don't have a carbohydrate requirement. So my definition of species appropriate for dogs and cats is high moisture, high great quality protein, at moderate healthy fats, and very low carb. Low carb meaning less than 20%, ideally 10% for dogs, and certainly under 10% for kitties. So the three questions everyone knows that they're either going to find on the website. And some companies, I talked to a great raw food company last week, and he said to me, we hate answering the phone. We only have 2 customer service. We put everything online. We put our sourcing. Here are the farms the meat comes from. So call them and they'll vouch that we buy meat from them. Here are our veggie sources. Here is, here it's a GAP for a global animal partnership rated for ethically sourced, slaughtered pigs. It's a GAP 4 rated pig farm. And here it is on the map and you can check it out. But they also put their nutritional analysis online. And that's the other big thing that in this day and age, you have to ask for this newer category of foods. Because as I mentioned, Alan, this new category of foods, because it's the fastest growing segment of the pet food industry, it's also a very lucrative segment of the pet food industry. And whenever there's an opportunity for economic growth, there's an opportunity for cheating, lying, and non-transparent issues. And it breaks my heart to say this, but just in this last 16 months, I have found more poorly formulated foods on the fresher category that I've ever seen before. And they're making hand over fist money. And they're not good products. And they're lying on their websites and they're lying about their products. But if their clients would ask these 3 questions, Ellen, when you talk to someone on the phone, or even when you go to the website, if the website's super transparent and really trying to give you more information than you need, that's a great sign. But it's when you pick up the phone and you call a customer service agent, you get a feeling, if they're like, oh my gosh, we're so excited you called. Yes, we'll send you our nutritional analysis of our food compared to AFCO. Here's where we source things from. Yeah, we do have to get Perna muscle from New Zealand because it's the only place we can find it. And we do get our lamb from New Zealand, but they'll have an honest, transparent, natural conversation with the person on the other end of the line. If you call your pet food company and you get a customer service rep who has no idea what you're talking about, will absolutely not give you the answers you need or say, let me guess, you've been talking to Dr. Becker. We don't have a formulator for our food because Mother Nature formulated our raw diets. I love Mother Nature, but if they aren't using any recipe or anything that has been documented to meet minimum nutritional requirements, or if they actually haven't submitted their food for nutritional analysis, so they don't even know exactly what nutrients are in their food, how can we as veterinarians recommend foods when the companies themselves aren't even finding out what's in them? We can't. So then you as the consumer are going to tell on the phone, you know what, like you won't give me the answers I need. And I don't feel comfortable that you haven't a nutritional analysis. And I don't feel comfortable that you won't share the nutritional analysis with me. I'm going to find a different company. And what I have found is by just doing the simple steps, Ellen, of educating pet parents on those 3 simple things to ask or look for on the website, not only do you become an instant expert on discerning, yeah, I want to feed this. Oh, this company uses factory farm meats versus organic. Okay, cool. I didn't know that. The cool thing about this brand new niche entering into the marketplace and being the fastest growing segment of the pet food industry is that there is a price point for everyone. So it goes from, cheap to really expensive. And there is a food or brand out there to meet almost everyone's situation. And so it's our job then as consumers to go find the company that we aligned with. And that's the most important advice we can give anyone listening is as guardians, my job is to take care of my animals and my job is to help you take care of yours, but not to make decisions for you, not to tell you what to feed. You have to know in your heart as a blessed client, fellow pet lover, that you're doing the right things for your animals because you know what's best for your own beloveds and I know what's best for mine. So I think as veterinarians partnering in this hopefully lifelong relationship of our blessed patients, our job is to teach our clients to ask the right questions to get the information that they need. And I think that that's the piece, Ellen, that's been missing with previous, veterinarians 40 years ago. It was, I'm the doctor and you're the client, and here's the brand I want you to feed, and don't ask me a whole lot of questions. And thankfully, all that has changed. And millennials are my favorite category of people because they are on the phone and they are like, I know that taurine, you have taurine in your food, and taurine only comes from China because there's not really a US manufacturer of taurine yet. So I'm fine with Chinese supplements, but where do you get it from? Is it organic? And is it human grade taurine or is it feed grade taurine? Like millennials know that stuff. And I love it because they're forcing transparency for the companies that haven't been, and that is providing a great opportunity for people to get the foods they want and the foods that they believe that is really in the bag. So brand new frontiers opening up because of transparency.
Wow. Thank you. I mean, as you were saying, I had a whole list of questions and you addressed so many of them now already that we don't even need to go there. Some of the questions that I would still have is, okay, to me, we have this great challenge these days with what is organic now that that's gotten watered down where it can have up to 10% non-organic food in it.
Yep.
And the challenge with glyphosate, Roundup, it's, it's out there, it's documented. It isn't me saying anything heresy or anything, but the research seems pretty clear about what it does to our gut microflora.
Yeah, it does.
And so how do we decide, like when I ask a pet food company, do you have glyphosate in your food? And it's almost impossible for someone to say no because it spreads.
Exactly.
And so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And so you're absolutely right. It's really hard to avoid glyphosate. And the other thing I'll just mention is economics. Most humans on the planet can't afford, we all would love to feed all organic to our own human family members and all of the animals in our home. And if you are blessed to have the income to do that, do it. Absolutely do it. You're just minimizing your toxic metabolic burden. So that's massive. But the truth is, Ellen, many people can't afford organic food. And organic is you'll see the word organic on websites, but AFCO still doesn't labeling for organic and labeling for human grade and labeling for non-GMO. It's a bunch of muddy political waters that makes it difficult to read the label and know much of anything. So when you call the companies will say to you something like, we're using all factory farm meats. And that's fine because it makes the food economical for most people on the planet. If you decide you want to feed organic, then you can call the company and ask if they've done third-party certification. And the vast majority of pet food companies that I'm partnered with now, they're sourcing from what they believe are the cleanest sources that they can find for their parameters, but they're also doing something really cool. New companies entering the marketplace are doing voluntary third-party testing, which is so cool. There's a new organization called Check Your Pet Food. Dr. Lori Koger is partnering with a bunch of transparent, forward-thinking pet food companies. And she is randomly taking products off the shelf or having them shipped and ordered to her house, depending on how their distribution model is. And she is submitting quietly behind the company's back, submitting their products that they're selling to the public for contaminants, heavy metals. How much does the food's nutritional analysis meet what they've published? What's the heavy metal load? So companies are paying now to have third-party testing so they can use those results to show people, just like you, saying, hey, I know that your food's conventionally raised, but I wonder how much glyphosate's in it. Companies are saying, here it is. And they're good, transparent companies aren't ashamed of showing you their results, because we can assume if the food's not organic, there's going to be some glyphosate in it. The question is how much. So transparent companies are just doing third-party testing and then showing pet parents the results. And that's such a beautiful way to just put it out there so you know what you're feeding. And same with organic companies. Organic companies will do third-party testing and gladly show you their results because they're proud of the fact that their food is below threshold for glyphosate. So ask the company to show you their third-party testing results. That's the best way for you to know what levels of contaminants, even things like some companies are checking for PBDEs, flame retardants. I don't know how much you know about cats and flame retardants, but there's flame retardants in food. There's contaminants like ethoxyquin that comes from third-party suppliers that some pet food companies aren't even aware, not to mention all of the mislabeled meat. So there's DNA testing that can be done to make sure that if you have an animal with IBD and your veterinarian does testing to determine the only protein your dog can eat is rabbit and goat. Okay, cool. If you go and buy a commercially available rabbit and goat diet, do you know there's about a 26% chance that the foods you're buying contain animals beyond rabbit and goat, which means it's going to make your IBD worse. And it's not that the companies are outright lying to you. It's that they're getting meat meals that have all sorts of everything thrown into it that makes it impossible for you to know exactly what species you're feeding. So third-party testing fixes all that. And so my suggestion is anyone that is thinking about switching brands, or you think, you know what, I've never heard any of this before, and I'm going to call the company, and you get answers on the quality, processing technique, or species appropriateness that you just don't like. When you go to ask better questions, you can start with, hey, have you done third-party testing and can I see it? Because it instantly takes away that frustration of, are you lying? Did you not do the testing? Or is it don't ask, don't tell? Like you just don't want to know. And people that will participate in third-party testing are proud of their products and proud of their results, whatever they may be. And then you're able to cut through all the riffraff pretty quickly.
That's awesome information. For our audience, what is the name of the third-party company you're talking about to check?
Yeah, checkyourpetfood.com.
Checkyourpetfood.com.
Yep.
Okay.
And Lori Koger started just recently, but she's got companies lined up to test. And as those results come out, and right now, if the vast majority of companies have not tested because it's a relatively new organization, but she has tested several dozen pet food companies. If you have a pet food company that you love that hasn't done contaminant testing, ask the company to please submit food through Check Your Pet Food, because it's a great third-party way to validate their great products, and a great way for you to know in your heart that what you think you're feeding, you're actually feeding. So it's a win-win.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's the exact information. We have a list of so many questions, and that's the exact information. Okay, what do you do to check? Because I talk to different pet food companies. I've done this for eons too, and you get great stuff. And I'm happy to say I'm very impressed with Raised Right, who you were with, help formulate and stuff. But there's so many other different options that people want to know about. And like you, I just got overwhelmed. I got every week someone was calling me about a new pet food.
Yes. And it tells me two things, Ellen. When you and I can't keep up, it tells me, number one, I'm getting old, which is fine, but it also tells me, number two, how exciting that there's so many people. And here's the cool thing. I work with a lot of just unbelievable micro independent pet food companies now, and every single one of them, when you ask their CEO or owner why, they all say, I had a sick dog or cat. I did food different. Like, it gives me goosebumps. My life is forever changed because I thought food may do something, but I didn't know food would do this. And people have to know. And their passion, because like they figured out what you and I figured out, you 40 years ago, me 20 years ago. They their passion is infectious. And they're like, you know what? I quit my six-figure job and now now I own a pet food company. I love that. And there's dozens a month emerging. So it makes it impossible to keep up. But those passionate micro independent pet food companies are so excited to talk to you on the phone and tell you about their products that you'll get either a really good vibe when you call or check their website, or you're going to get weirded out or frustrated when you call on the phone. And don't get frustrated. Just realize, okay, they were unable to provide nutritional analysis. They were unable or unwilling to tell me sourcing. They were unable or unwilling to provide to me um, third-party contaminant testing. I guess I don't feel comfortable with this brand. So let the frustration go and move along to a food that better aligns with you.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, um, two of the big questions, and you brought up both of these issues that I see, I'd have to say almost at epidemic levels, is inflammatory bowel
Oh,
disease.
yeah,
You know, when I started out, oh, you'd have one or two or this or that, but it's epidemic both in humans and our animal friends.
yeah,
Okay.
you,
And so when you and I, we tend to be investigative epidemiologic detectives in our own ways. And so I go, okay, wait a minute. Something like this isn't hereditary. You don't get an epidemic of something hereditary. It's just duh,
yep,
not that I'm aware of.
yep.
So that what is causing all the inflammatory bowel? And like we said, to me, it's so much of what's going in the pet foods that is not being labeled.
Yeah.
Also, the rampant increase in glyphosate is highly suspicious. That's, the data is there.
Yep.
And so, that's something, and in conventional medicine, we talk about single food, single protein diets for inflammatory bowel, but there's still debate on that.
Yep.
So I'm just curious what your thought is for this epidemic of inflammatory bowel. What are you finding
Yeah.
beneficial that you can share with our
Yeah.
viewers?
Well, first of all, you hit the nail on the head. And when I talk to not just yourself, but several of my veterinary mentors, all older and much more seasoned, the cancer rate and the IBD rate and the allergies.
Yes.
When I asked all of my mentors, how many cases, I have one veterinary mentor who said to me, he remembers when he first started practicing, he didn't see cancer till his second year of practice. I saw cancer my second day as a veterinarian. So things are changing, regardless of what statistics they're willing to offer us. I do believe IBD, allergies, and cancer, all autoimmune metabolic issues, are absolutely on the rise. And I believe that that's also true of people, as you alluded to. And I think two things are happening, but it's hitting our pets the hardest. We sadly live in a toxic world, and we have environmental toxins that we can't control for the most part, like our air quality. We're all breathing in anywhere from mildly polluted to heavily polluted air. Our tap water is full of a bunch of contaminants that I would encourage you to minimally filter out for you and your pets. But if you are not breathing purified air and you're not drinking purified water, those are just things you can't escape. So the environment itself lends itself to physiologic stress. But then animals have it extra bad for two big reasons. Number one, we remove choice from animals' viewpoint. We hold our animals like my Callie kitty is going to come join me in a minute. I hold Callie captive in my home. She does have a catio and she goes out every day on a leash to explore, but she is not allowed outside. She is just simply not allowed to go outside and roam around because it's too risky for her. I just don't believe in outdoor unattended kitties. The risk is too great. So she's in my house and we hold our dogs and cats captive, and they are not allowed to make their own independent choices. She can't forage for the foods that she needs. She can't move her body and exercise. I don't allow her to hunt. I don't allow her to do anything she would naturally do if she had opportunities outside my home. I just don't. So we create a beautiful synthetic environment for our dogs and cats. We hold them captive and we tell them, this is what you're going to eat. Now, in addition to the food issue, which I'll go back to in 1 minute, dogs and cats are naked and they're fuzzy and they're low to the ground. So if you live in an all green, chemical free home, if you are not, anything that on any cleaning product that on the back says call poison control if ingested or consumed, know that every cleaning product in your house, your dog and cat is going to ingest. Everything in your home is going to end up inside your dog or cat. In fact, the Environmental Working Group released a study several years ago that said that 64 of the top industrial chemicals are found in the blood of dogs and cats in higher concentration than humans. And that's because they don't shower. They're not wearing protective socks. And so they're literally Swiffers. They're walking around our house collecting, if you do plugins, if you do candles, if you're sprinkling stuff on your carpet, if you're Febrezing the dog bed, if you are spraying things in the air, if you're lighting highly scented synthetic candles, your animals are ingesting that. And if you have a beautiful dandelion-free yard because Chemlon or whatever pest company comes and sprays in and around your home every year, or every month, your animals are bioaccumulating toxins at a rate that their organs of detoxification can't keep up with. And that's just the world we live in. So will I encourage you as pet parents to minimize the toxins you can? Of course. Then we have veterinary toxins. And I love my conventional colleagues, but we tend to overdo it to err on the side of caution. So we tell you things like, regardless of where you live and what temperature zone you're in and what season it is, put your dog on heartworm prevention and oral pesticide every month, year round, from the time that they're born to the time that they die. And once a month, apply a topical pesticide for fleas and ticks. So, and those are just regular veterinary recommendations. And yet when we have kids, those of us that have children, when we go for our walk in the woods, we don't say, hold still, I'm going to apply your topical pesticide. We don't do that with our kids, but we do it with our pets. So dogs and cats have a profound environmental chemical burden that we at least shower and rinse that stuff off, and dogs and cats don't. But back to the food issue. Not only do we not allow our animals to self-select hardly anything. Now, I have completed my second zoopharmacognosy class, and so I'm very much into self-selection. I allow my animals to forage for medicinal plants and herbs and things that they need for their physiology. But that is a brand new concept that other veterinarians are like, absolutely not. But for the most part, we dictate when they'll eat, what they eat, how much they eat, and we don't change it very often. So out of that, if you happen to pick a food that's highly popular, but also highly toxic, your animals are forced to choose between eating toxic food or fasting and not eating at all. So they're going to eat. And out of that, Alan, comes animals eating. 99% of pets in America eat ultra processed foods. And just as we know with humans, in the last 40 years, we finally have some research saying North Americans should minimize their intake of fast food and highly processed foods because it's linked to lifestyle related diseases like cancer, diabetes, and obesity. And we believe as functional medicine doctors and human nutritionists that everyone should eat more living unprocessed foods and minimize our consumption of highly processed foods. And every human nutritionist, dietitian, every human medical doctor will stand by those recommendations. And yet, Alan, in veterinary medicine, our blessed colleagues still stand by their recommendation that all pets should eat is highly processed foods, never giving any fresh food, never doing choice. And if you rotate, maybe rotate between flavors, but not between brands. And these animals consume dead, inorganic, overprocessed, chemically tainted food their whole lives. That's pretty clear on where metabolic decline occurs. But I think most importantly, what that's doing to an animal's microbiome, the healthy, good initial defense system, where 70% of animals' immune system is in their GI tract, their blessed GI immune system can't keep up. And first, what happens is inflammation. So the I of IBD is inflammation. And whether your veterinarian has formally diagnosed it, IBD, IBS, whether it's gastritis, enteritis, colitis, sensitive stomach, whatever you want to say, intermittent vomiting, diarrhea, GI upset, throwing up, straining, blood in the stool, nausea, all of that umbrella of symptoms that plagues a ton of people in North America. I have to put GERD in there because it's massive for pets and people. This category of profound GI dysfunction, absolutely in owners, but The vast majority of dogs and cats, people can say, you know what, I can check one of those boxes. My dog farts all the time. My cat oscillates between blowout diarrhea and then she doesn't go poo for a week. So many pet parents can comment about their dogs or cats being sensitive. And because the eye of inflammation, we have to think about, well, what could be causing inflammation in the GI tract? Well, certainly eating ultra processed diets all along. You hit the nail on the head. Pets are not born with IBD or IBS, they grow into it. And eating the same food day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, you get into about 2 to 3 years of the exact same monotone, highly processed, inflammatory, irritating, allergenic diet. It's not really that much of a stretch for any pet parent or any veterinarian to think that makes sense why we have an epidemic of IBD. Every patient, Alan, with IBD also has dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is the medical term for what's called leaky gut. And when animals get leaky gut, those tight junctions in the small intestine open, they allow partially digested food, allergens, environmental contaminants. They allow substances into the body that then the immune system can overreact to, which then there's a cascade of additional issues. You first start with a sensitive gutted animal and you end up with all sorts of systemic immunologic reactions that ultimately were originally created from, in my opinion, a lack of a diversified diet that provides nutrients in a wholly absorbable, digestible, and bioassimilatable form in a way that a dog or cat's body can identify as food and not ultra processed food like products, to allow them to take in the nourishment they need and keep out all the stuff that they don't. And when that tight junction dysbiotic system happens in the GI tract, a massive meltdown occurs. And you end up at the end of 2 to 3 years and 5 to 10 grand with a diagnosis of IBD. And so then the question is, how do we work the way out of it? Well, by this time, typically the pet parent has rotated through 15 different proteins. They're allergic to all of them. They're allergic to everything. Everything causes a reaction. In fact, my simple, easy, cheap, free diagnostic test for IBD now is in a perfect in a perfect gutted human or animal. You should be able to eat something different every day. So I have focused on creating healthy gutted animals for my own personal pets. So I can feed chicken one day, turkey the next, bison the next, goat, rabbit, elk, venison, quail, beaver, alligator. I can rotate through 14 different proteins, different veggie sources every day. I feed them something different all the time. And my goal is to make sure that they never have loose stool, they're never farting, never belching. Because if I want to create a gut of steel in my patients, because I know if they have a gut of steel, they have an immune system of steel. I've done that for my own personal pack, and I do that with all of my clients. But for pets that haven't had that done, that they've been on the same monotonous diet that has created the inflamed, irritated, allergenic situation, my number one recommendation is stop the madness. Go find out what food sensitivities your dog or cat has. Go to Dr. Dodd's Nutriscan.org site, order a test kit, do it at home. It's a saliva test. It's highly accurate. It identifies food sensitivities, not allergies, food sensitivities. There's going to be a list of the most common proteins and veggies. And then you can pick from that list, okay, these are foods that my dog didn't react to, and these are foods that are a big no-no. The best and easiest, sharpest, simplest, most direct path to healing IBD is identifying the root cause of IBD. And almost always, Alan, there is one, and almost always it's a reactive food source. So rather than guessing and guessing and guessing and guessing, do a Nutriscan saliva test, identify what foods are on your safe yes list, pick 2 of those foods, pick a bland veggie like zucchini, and let's say in my original example that goat and rabbit are on your dog's yes list. Initially, when your dog has had blowout explosive bloody diarrhea, is lethargic and doesn't feel like eating anything, you're going to do a homemade, nutritionally unbalanced diet of a steamed gentle veggie and a cooked gentle meat. You're going to feed that for a few days, ideally at the same time partnering with a functional or integrative medicine doctor. And the reason I would suggest partnering with a knowledgeable professional is that just as human medical doctors can help humans rebuild their GI tract, recover from leaky gut, recover from dysbiosis, and balance their microbiome, Functional medicine veterinarians can do the exact same thing with your dog or cat. We can send off a microbiome sample, or pet parents can do it too. You can go to animalbiome.com. Dr. Holly Gantz will analyze your dog or cat's microbiome and be like, holy cats, this is really off. These are, you've got this terrible shift. I did a microbiome analysis of a dog 4 months ago, and there was not a single good bug in this dog's gut to process protein. He had no ability to process protein, none, because he had been on antibiotics for 17 or 18 months. So regardless of what he was eating, he couldn't process it. After 3 days of the appropriate probiotics reseeding his gut so that he could process protein, he had the first solid poo in 2 years of his life. And that's because we picked the right strain for his dysbiosis. And then we avoided feeding proteins that he was reactive to. And she had dynamic and profound healing in 2 short weeks after we identified what foods were this dog's toxins and what did we need to reseed his gut with. And between those 2 simple tests, we were able to fix this dog. And in my opinion, because functional medicine, integrative doctors start there, you can save a whole lot of pain and heartbreak, unnecessary testing, and most importantly, degeneration. Animals that have to live in bodies, those of you that have IBD or Crohn's, this is a bad way to live. And it's a miserable way for our pets to live too. So by quickly and efficiently addressing the root cause of why IBD is going on, you can not just restore their gut health, but you restore their overall vitality. But the key is identifying the root cause.
Hmm. Boy, Karen, thank you so much. Because this is something, I have my own approach to IBD with my clients, and thank God it's extremely successsul. But you've
Yes.
given us some new tips in here that I wasn't even aware of. So,
Well, and probably, Alan, you have done it with, as all of my mentors have, before these fancy schmancy diagnostic tests were available. You
absolutely.
didn't have this available to you. So you have honed your system of nutraceuticals and Chinese herbs. You've honed your natural pharmacy to be this unbelievable tool kit of amazing resources that are not just tried and true, but you've tested them on thousands of patients. So you know what works and what doesn't, because you've done it the hard way, Alan. You did it through trial and error 40 years ago. And you've got this perfected toolkit that works for you. The good news is, for graduating new young integrative veterinarians, the wisdom of your veteran expertise combined with some of these brand new functional medicine tests is the beautiful blend of both of those worlds, because we can provide the best protocols that have decades of solid science and research behind it with brand new functional testing, and we get our patients farther faster by blending both of those together.
Thank you. We're running out of time. I would love to hear more about this, and there's so many other questions. So hopefully, in the midst of your crazy busy schedule, we'll be able to do something
Catch up again. We'll
again.
catch up again. Thank you so much for this beautiful
Yeah.
platform, for having me on as one of your guests. It's delightful.
Yeah, it's such a joy. And, in the midst of this COVID epidemic
Yeah.
or pandemic, what we're finding is we're actually having a chance to be quiet. And our animals are actually, I find they're loving having us around more.
They are.
Most of them. Some, there are these jokes saying, oh my God, he wants to take me for another walk, or,
Yeah.
oh,
You bring up a really good point. I think a lot of dogs and cats are like, what are you still doing home? So one thing I do want to mention, I had the honor of interviewing Dr. Biagio Daniello from University of Italy. He was the scientist that broke the news 3 years ago that you and I, most veterinarians, most people know that there's an old adage that dogs smell fear. And for a long time, up until 3 years ago, people
that's
have
my
said,
peacock.
oh, I love it. He's signaling it's time to wrap it up. I love
Yeah.
that. He was the guy that proved that animals can actually not just smell fear as an emotion, but he tested fear and joy both. And he proved it, wrote it up. It stopped the internet. All the scientists were like, oh, they're not anthropomorphizing. They can, and not just fear. Dr. Biagio has gone on to identify rage, depression. His laboratory now is testing a whole host of emotions. And within 0.1 of a second, dogs can smell a sweat sample of a human that has just undergone rage, joy, happiness, fear, depression. And not only does he identify it, but the dog physiology changes because of the human emotion. So I tell you this story because right now we're all stressed and our lives are very different. And we're at home secreting a lot of cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone. And what research shows is when we chuck a lot of stress hormone, our dogs and cats both, not only can they identify it, they start chucking cortisol. So now the whole family's releasing cortisol and stress hormones. And that's a recipe in a tight space without the ability to exercise and move our bodies and get fresh air for stress to accumulate. And when stress accumulates, not only does that suppress our immune system, not the goal during this outbreak, but it also makes for shortened patience width and a whole host of other emotional, physiological, metabolic changes that aren't good for us. So here's my tips pertaining to COVID. Use this time at home, even if you don't want to be at home, as probably the one blessed time in our lives when we have the ability to not just connect with our animals, not just to use them as a healing, furry, balmy salve for the stress that we're undergoing, but we can actually do our part at seeing how we can be better guardians in terms of enriching our pets' lives. I use this time at home to train my cat to walk on a leash. When would I ever have time to do that? Never. I'm like, here's your catio. It's a really big one. You should like it. I would never have time to train my kitty to walk on a leash, but I did. I'm clicker training my kitty now to do tricks. She knows sit and stay. So use the time you have with your animals to see life from their perspective, and to also realize that this event actually, it's not as stressful for your pets, but they are picking up on the stress that we're secreting. So if at all possible, this is a blessed time for us to work on, amidst stress, learning tools to ground ourselves out, maintain a sense of peace and calmness, find a way to figure out, to download a meditation app, learn some tools in our own emotional toolbox to how we can become calmer humans, feeling better in our own skin with a more grounded and balanced perspective of what's to come. Because the sooner we can feel better in our own cartons, the sooner our animals will smell that we are okay, joyful, and happy. And then they will convert their sympathetic fight or flight to parasympathetic calming. And once you get that vortex of peace and calming going in your home, it becomes a magical sanctuary, not a stressful annoyance that you have to get away from. So my tip is work on yourself to improve the vibration of your entire home.
So beautiful. What a perfect ending. We have people on the chat line, but we're out of time, unfortunately. I'll make sure to address those afterwards.
Oh.
But thank you so much. And I hope to have you back on, and congratulations. It brings such joy to my heart to see how you're blossoming and all the benefit you're being for all these beings. So
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for the
Okay.
support. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.